The verdict came down like a hammer on metal. Every human representative in the Galactic Council chamber felt the weight of those words, crushing their hopes for peaceful coexistence. Governor Helen Reeves kept her face calm, even as her hands gripped the railing in front of her seat. She had expected rejection, maybe trade sanctions, possibly even a fine. But exile? That was something else entirely. Council Representative Vashtar stood at the center podium, his forearms spread wide in what his species considered a gesture of finality. His voice echoed through the massive chamber, translated instantly into hundreds of languages for the assembled delegates. Humanity has proven itself too aggressive, too hungry for expansion. In the past decade alone, your species has colonized 17 worlds. You extract resources without proper consideration for galactic balance. You multiply at rates that concern all peaceful species. Helen wanted to shout back that 17 worlds over 10 years was nothing compared to the Zenfari Collective's 42 colonies in the same period. But she held her tongue. The trial had already been decided before it began. She could see it in the way other delegates avoided looking at the human section. Therefore, Vashtar continued, humanity shall be relocated to Ashara 7, a world suitable for your particular talents at survival. A cold laugh escaped from somewhere in the alien galleries. Helen pulled up the planetary data on her personal device and felt her stomach drop. Ashara 7 was a nightmare. Surface temperature averaging 180 degrees. Atmosphere thick with sulfuric compounds that would burn through standard environmental suits in hours. Dust storms that could strip paint off a starship hull. No visible water sources. No vegetation. Nothing but rock and poison and heat. They were being sent there to die. Dr. Omar Khalid leaned over from the seat beside her. Can we appeal? Helen shook her head slightly. Look at their faces. This was decided weeks ago. Captain Rita Stone, seated on Helen's other side, muttered under her breath. How long do they think we'll last? 6 months, Helen whispered back. Maybe less. That's their bet. The council chamber erupted in formal approvals and procedural votes. Within an hour, humanity's fate was sealed. 50,000 colonists would be transported to Ashara 7 within the month. The rest of humanity's scattered populations across friendly worlds would be monitored. That was the word Vashtar used. Monitored. It meant hostages. Leverage to ensure the exiles went quietly. Helen stood and straightened her jacket. She caught Vashtar's compound eyes across the chamber. He looked satisfied, almost pleased. She made herself smile at him and nod, as if accepting a reasonable compromise rather than a death sentence. 3 weeks later, the human convoy dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Ashara system. Helen stood in the observation deck of the lead transport ship, watching the planet grow larger on the view screen. It looked like a rotting fruit, all browns and sickly yellows, wrapped in a haze of toxic atmosphere. Behind her, 200 ships carried everything humanity could gather on short notice. Seeds and equipment, manufacturing tools and medical supplies, weapons and hope. 50,000 people who volunteered to go into exile rather than let their families become permanent hostages to the Council's whims. Initial scans confirmed the Council's data. Rita reported from the command station. Surface temperature 179 degrees at the coolest regions. Atmospheric composition is 70% nitrogen, 25% sulfur dioxide, 5% various toxins. No liquid water detected on surface. Underground? Helen asked, scanning now. Wait. Rita's expression changed. Helen, there's something. Deep aquifers, maybe 3 kilometers down. The Council's survey only went surface level. Helen felt the first spark of real hope since the trial. How much water? If these readings are right, enough for 100 times our population. It's hot, probably mineral-rich, but it's water. Dr. Khalid joined them at the railing, his dark eyes studying the readouts. We can work with hot water. We can filter minerals. What we cannot work with is no water at all. The council doesn't know? Helen asked. Rita shook her head. Their scans were deliberately shallow. They wanted to document a dead rock, not a potential colony site. They didn't dig deep enough. Helen allowed herself a small smile. Then we have an advantage they don't know about. The ships entered orbit around Ashara 7. Immediately, long-range sensors picked up other vessels at the edge of the system. Observation ships from a dozen species, all keeping their distance, all waiting to watch humanity's extinction up close. Helen activated the fleet-wide communication channel. 50,000 faces appeared on screens throughout every ship, looking to her for leadership, for hope, for any reason to believe they might survive what came next. They gave us this world because they thought it would kill us, Helen said simply. They're watching from a safe distance, waiting for us to fail. They think we'll be dead in 6 months. She paused, letting that sink in. Earth made us strong. We survived ice ages and droughts. We lived in deserts and frozen tundras. We built cities in places that tried to kill us every single day. This planet is hot and toxic and angry, but so was Earth before we learned to thrive there. Helen looked directly into the camera. They gave us hell and called it exile. I say we turn it into home. Let's show the galaxy what humans do with impossible situations. The response was immediate. Cheers and shouts echoed through every ship. Tools started moving, equipment being prepped. Drilling machinery powered up and ready. Below them, Ashara 7 waited like a test, like a challenge. Like a promise. Helen watched the observation ships on the long-range display. Make sure they have a good view, she told Rita. I want them to see everything. Dust devils danced across the landing site like angry spirits, each one hot enough to cook meat. Rita watched through the reinforced viewport as the first drilling rig descended from orbit, wrapped in heat shielding that glowed red even before it touched ground. The moment its legs made contact with Ashara 7's surface, the temperature sensors screamed warnings. 192 degrees at ground level, the technician reported. Rig is holding steady. Rita nodded. They had 3 hours before the equipment would start to fail. 3 hours to drill deep enough to reach cooler layers where they could begin real work. Start drilling. Full power. The rig roared to life, its bit tearing into rock that had never known a gentle touch. Within minutes, it had punched through 30 meters. Within an hour, it had reached 200. The temperature reading started dropping as the drill went deeper. Dr. Khalid monitored everything from the mobile command center, a heavily shielded vehicle that served as their first structure on the planet. Temperature at drill depth is now 90 degrees. We can work with that. Keep going, Helen ordered. Don't stop until we hit water or bedrock. The observation ships maintained their distant watch. Occasionally, Rita caught their scans sweeping over the human operations. They were documenting everything, probably sending updates back to the council. Let them watch. Let them see humans refuse to die quietly. By the end of the first week, 6 drilling sites had reached the underground aquifers. The water came up hot and stinking of minerals, but it came up. Chemical analysis showed high concentrations of calcium and magnesium, some sulfur compounds. But nothing the filtration systems could not handle. It's better than we hoped, Khalid announced to the gathered team leaders. This water has been underground for millions of years. It's hot because of geothermal activity below. That same heat can power our generators. Helen studied the geological maps spreading across her display. How deep can we safely build? 3 to 4 kilometers down, we hit stable bedrock formations. Temperature there is comfortable, around 70 degrees. No surface storms can reach us. We could build entire cities. Then that's what we do, Helen decided. Forget surface operations for now. We go underground. We build where the planet can't kill us. The next 6 months transformed the initial drilling sites into entry points for something far more ambitious. Massive tunnel boring machines, designed for asteroid mining, chewed through rock at incredible speeds. They carved out chambers large enough to hold thousands of people. Following natural cave systems where possible, creating new spaces where necessary. Rita personally oversaw the security aspects, ensuring every tunnel had multiple exits, every chamber had independent life support. "We're building a civilization underground," she told her team. "If something fails, people die. Check everything twice." The first residential chamber opened after 4 months. Workers moved in immediately, grateful to escape the cramped transport ships. The space was rough, with bare rock walls and minimal decoration, but it was cool and safe and growing. Within days, someone had painted a mural on one wall. Within weeks, there were gardens growing under artificial lights, real plants and real soil shipped from Earth. The observation ships noticed the reduced activity on the surface and interpreted it as failure. Their reports back to the Council suggested the humans were dying quietly underground, their numbers dwindling as life support systems failed one by one. They could not have been more wrong. By month 8, the underground complex had 15 major chambers connected by smooth transit tunnels. Hydroponic farms fed the population with fresh vegetables. Geothermal generators provided unlimited power. The filtered water, once cleaned of minerals, tasted better than anything available on the transport ships. Khalid made his breakthrough on day 293. He stood in his laboratory, deep in the complex, staring at a battery prototype that should not work but did. "The sulfur compounds in the atmosphere," he explained to Helen. "We've been treating them as waste to be scrubbed away, but they're incredibly energy dense. I've created a battery that uses sulfur dioxide as its primary component." Helen studied the small device. How much better than standard galactic batteries? 40% higher energy density, 60% longer life, and we can manufacture them here using the planet's own atmosphere as raw material. Helen smiled slowly. "The planet they sent us to die on is going to make us rich." By the end of the first year, New Mesa was a functioning city. 15,000 people lived in comfortable underground homes. Schools operated for the children. Medical facilities hummed with clean air and good water. Entertainment spaces featured live music and art galleries. The remaining 35,000 colonists were spread across 4 other developing sites, each growing rapidly. Helen sent her first report to the Galactic Council exactly 1 year after landing. It included full documentation of the underground cities, the thriving population, the stable food production, and the new battery technology they had developed. The response took 3 days to arrive. It was a single word from Vashtar: impossible. Helen recorded her reply personally. "You gave us a dead world and expected us to die on it. We built a home instead. Ashara 7 is now officially requesting trade status. We have goods to sell and a population to feed. Standard colonial protocols apply." She sent the message and leaned back in her office chair, 3 kilometers beneath the deadly surface. In a room decorated with photos from Earth and art, created by colonists who had found time to remember beauty, even in exile, Rita entered without knocking, carrying 2 cups of synthesized coffee. "The observation ships are going crazy. Their scans show massive energy signatures all over the planet now." "Good," Helen said, accepting the coffee. "Let them see. Let them tell the Council. We're not dying. We're living." Above them, Ashara 7's toxic storms raged across an empty surface. Below, humanity thrived. 5 years after landing, Helen walked through the central garden of New Mesa and could hardly believe they had built all this in such a short time. Trees reached toward artificial sunlight panels mounted on the cavern ceiling 30 meters above. Real grass grew beneath her feet. Children played near a fountain that recycled water through a system so efficient it lost less than 1% to evaporation. A young woman approached, tablet in hand. Lyra was a Zenthari, one of the few aliens who had quietly joined the human colony after the first year. Her species looked almost human, except for the silver undertones in their skin and the slight glow in their eyes. "Governor, the atmospheric processors are ready for the surface installation," Lyra reported. She had been one of the junior observers on those watching ships, but had requested asylum after seeing what humans were building. Now she worked as Khalid's primary assistant. "Dr. Khalid believes we can start?" Helen asked. "He says we have enough power now. The geothermal plants are producing 3 times our needs." Helen nodded. "Then let's begin the next phase." The atmospheric processors were massive machines, each one the size of a small building. They had been designed on Earth decades ago for theoretical terraforming projects that never happened. Now humanity would use them to turn poison into breath. The first processor rose to the surface on a heavy lift platform. Heat shielding protected it during the ascent. Once on the surface, automated systems deployed anchors that drilled deep into bedrock. Within hours, the machine was secure against the fiercest storms. Ashara 7 could throw at it. Khalid activated it remotely from his underground laboratory. "Processor 1 is online. Beginning atmospheric conversion." The machine began pulling in the toxic atmosphere, separating the sulfur compounds, breaking down the dangerous elements, and releasing cleaner air. One processor would not make much difference to an entire planet's atmosphere, but it was a start. Over the next 2 years, 40 more processors went online. They worked constantly, never stopping, slowly reducing the toxicity of Ashara 7's air. Simultaneously, other projects launched. Massive orbital shades deployed in carefully calculated positions, reducing the amount of sunlight hitting the surface by 12%. Surface temperatures dropped by 8 degrees. Ice-laden comets, dragged from the outer system by careful navigation, impacted in designated zones. Each impact added water to the surface, creating small lakes that immediately evaporated in the heat, but left minerals behind and increased atmospheric moisture. The transformation was slow but measurable. The sky, once a sickly yellow, took on a gray-blue tint in some regions. Surface temperature at the poles dropped to 150 degrees. Still hot but no longer instantly lethal to properly equipped humans. The Galactic Council finally sent an official delegation. They arrived in 3 ships, broadcasting formal requests for permission to land. Helen granted it with a smile. Vashtar led the delegation. He had aged in 5 years, his shell showing new stress patterns. He stood in the landing bay of New Mesa, 3 kilometers underground, and stared at the city spreading before him. "This is impossible," he said finally. "You've said that before," Helen replied. "Come, let me show you what humanity does with impossible." The tour lasted 6 hours. Helen showed them the hydroponic farms feeding 55,000 people with room for expansion. The manufacturing centers producing those revolutionary sulfur batteries that were already being quietly traded with independent merchants. The schools and hospitals and theaters. The art galleries featuring works from a dozen human cultures. She took them to one of the geothermal power stations, where superheated water from deep underground spun turbines that generated endless electricity. "The planet you sent us to die on provides everything we need," she explained. "Heat for power, minerals for manufacturing, water for life." Khalid showed them the atmospheric processors. "In 20 years, the surface will be breathable at the equator. In 50, across most of the planet. We're not just surviving here. We're changing the world itself." Rita demonstrated the defensive capabilities, though she kept the details vague. "We can protect what's ours," was all she said. And the hardness in her eyes made the delegation uncomfortable. The final stop was the natural hot springs chamber. A massive cavern where mineral-rich water bubbled up through cracks in the rock. Humans had built pools around the springs, each one at different temperature. People relaxed in the water, the minerals soothing their skin and joints. "We were dying," Vashtar said quietly. "Our species. We are not reproducing fast enough. Our joints ache with age earlier and earlier. Our physicians have no answers." He gestured at the springs. "This water. Does it help?" Khalid consulted his tablet. "The mineral composition is unique. High in calcium, magnesium, and trace elements we're still cataloging. Our medical staff reports significant health benefits. Reduced inflammation, better bone density, improved joint mobility." Vashtar looked at Helen. "Could others come here for treatment?" Helen considered the request. The man who sentenced her people to death was now asking for help. She could refuse. She could make him beg. She could demand reparations or apologies. Instead, she smiled. "We're opening commercial operations next quarter. Any species can apply for visitation permits. Standard rates apply. Commercial operations?" Another delegate asked, confused. "Tourism," Rita explained. "We're turning Ashara 7 into a resort destination. Extreme environment tours on the surface for adventurous types. Underground city tours for history enthusiasts. And these springs for anyone seeking therapeutic treatment." The delegation stared at her in disbelief. "You're joking," Vashtar said. Helen shook her head. "We're completely serious. The world you gave us to die on is about to become the galaxy's most unique vacation spot. We've already hired marketing consultants and begun construction on the first official hotel complex." She pulled up the promotional materials on a large display. Beautiful images of the underground cities, dramatic photos of surface storms viewed from safety, peaceful scenes of the healing springs. "Opening in 6 months," Helen announced. "Reservations are already filling up fast." The first tourist ship arrived on a Tuesday morning, 12 years after humanity's exile began. Helen watched from the observation deck as the luxury liner settled into orbit. Its hull decorated with the logo of Stellar Journeys, one of the galaxy's largest tour companies. 200 passengers, Rita reported. Mixed species. Mostly wealthy types looking for bragging rights about visiting the famous deathworld that humans tamed. Helen smiled. Let them brag. Their money spends the same as anyone else's. The transformation of Ashara 7 into a tourist destination had seemed crazy to many humans at first. But Helen had recognized the opportunity. The galaxy loved a dramatic story, and humanity's survival tale was the most dramatic in recent history. Why not profit from it? The first group descended to the surface in a specially designed shuttle. They wore climate suits rated for the still harsh conditions, though the surface temperature had dropped to 135 degrees in the equatorial regions. Breathable if you had the right equipment and did not stay too long. A young human guide named Amy led the tour. She had been born on Ashara 7, had never seen Earth except in videos, and had no fear of the surface that had killed earlier colonists who took foolish risks. "Welcome to the Scar," she announced, gesturing at the landscape. "This is where our colony first landed 12 years ago. See those metal stumps? Those were our first drilling rigs. They lasted 3 hours before the heat destroyed them." The tourists took pictures, their recording devices capturing every detail. A Thorsian couple, their fur protected by cooling suits, marveled at the rusty remains. "How did you survive?" the female asked. "We went down instead of staying up," Amy explained. "Humans are good at digging. Earth taught us that. Follow me." She led them to a massive entrance carved into the rock face. Inside, the temperature dropped immediately to a comfortable 70 degrees. The tourists removed their helmets, breathing filtered but natural air. The underground city tour was always the highlight. Amy took them through the original residential chambers, now preserved as historical sites. She showed them the first hydroponic garden, still growing but surrounded by information displays explaining the early struggles. We had 37 varieties of earth seeds, Amy narrated. 28 of them died in the first planting. But 9 survived, and from those 9, we fed ourselves until we could adapt the others. In the central garden, tourists wandered among trees that should not exist on this world. They sat on benches and drank water from the fountain, water that had been poisonous minerals just years ago, but now tasted pure and clean. Lyra found Helen in her office that evening. The feedback from the first group is very positive. They're calling it transformative and inspiring. Several have already booked return trips. And the springs? Helen asked. Lyra grinned. Fully booked for the next 3 months. Word spread fast about the therapeutic benefits. We have medical tourists coming specifically for treatments. The hot springs facility had expanded significantly. Where once there was a single natural cavern, now there were 12 different pools, each with specific mineral compositions for different health needs. Trained therapists, both human and alien, worked to maximize the healing effects. A wealthy merchant from the Dravian Consortium soaked in Pool 7. His scales visibly healthier after just 3 days of treatment. I haven't felt this good in 20 years, he told anyone who would listen. This place is magic. Not magic, Helen thought. Just chemistry and human determination. But if people wanted to believe in magic, she would not correct them. The extreme surface tours attracted a different crowd. Adventure seekers who wanted to experience the harsh environment firsthand, to walk where death had seemed certain, to feel the heat that once killed within hours. Rita personally supervised these tours, ensuring every safety protocol was followed. You want extreme? She told a group of young Xanthari thrill seekers. I'll show you extreme. But you follow my rules exactly, or you go back to the ship. They hiked across the rocky surface, climbing over formations carved by acidic storms. They watched dust devils dance in the distance. They stood at the edge of the thermal rift, a canyon where heat from below created visible waves in the air. People died out here in the early days, Rita told them, her voice serious. Good people who took risks trying to explore or who had equipment failures. We remember them. This planet is beautiful now, but it's still dangerous. Respect that. The tourists nodded, sobered by the reminder. When they returned to the underground city, they had new appreciation for what humans had accomplished. By the end of the first tourist season, Ashara 7 had hosted over 5,000 visitors. Revenue from tourism exceeded all projections. More importantly, the galaxy's perception of the planet had completely changed. News networks ran features about the transformation. Scientists wrote papers about the terraforming techniques. Other harsh world colonies sent delegations to learn human methods. Voshtar returned, traveling quietly without official delegation. He checked into one of the hotels under a private name, seeking treatment at the hot springs for his deteriorating joints. Helen found him there one evening, soaking alone in Pool 3. She sat on the edge, dangling her feet in the hot water. Feeling better? She asked. He rotated one arm carefully. The pain is less. I can move without grinding sounds. Your physicians say with regular treatments, I might regain full mobility. Good. Helen was quiet for a moment. You sentenced us to death here. I know. Voshtar's voice was heavy with old guilt. I believed we were protecting the galaxy from aggressive expansion. I was wrong. You were scared, Helen corrected. Humans were different, unpredictable. We grew fast and reached far. I understand fear. Will you forgive me? Helen considered the question. Around them, the underground city hummed with life. Above, the surface was slowly becoming habitable. Throughout the galaxy, people spoke of Ashara 7 with wonder instead of horror. I'll do better than forgive, she said. "I'll thank you. Without this exile, we never would have discovered what we could really do. You gave us a challenge that brought out our best." Voshtar laughed, a clicking sound from his alien throat. Only humans would thank someone for trying to kill them. Helen smiled. "We're strange that way." The corporate representatives arrived without warning, their ship broadcasting priority codes that demanded immediate audience. Helen read their identification with growing irritation. Galaxia Development Corporation, one of the largest mining and resource extraction companies in known space. With connections to half the council members and enough legal power to crush small colonies. "They want to meet today," Rita said, reading the formal request. "They're claiming urgent business opportunity." Helen sighed. "Show them to conference room 2. The nice one. Let them think we're impressed." 3 executives entered an hour later, their expensive clothing and confident postures marking them as people used to getting their way. The lead representative, a tall Quarthan named Director Thel, smiled with too many teeth. "Governor Reeves, thank you for seeing us on such short notice. We've been watching the Shara 7's development with great interest." "Have you?" Helen said flatly. "Please sit." They settled around the conference table. Director Thel activated a holographic display showing geological surveys of Ashara 7. "Your colony has proven something remarkable. This planet contains thermal cores of unprecedented value. The energy density is extraordinary." "We know," Helen said. "We use them to power our cities." "Yes, but you're barely scratching the surface. Galaxia Development has the technology and expertise to properly extract these resources. We're prepared to offer your colony a substantial sum for full mining rights." Helen leaned back in her chair. "How substantial?" Director Thel named a figure that would make every human on Ashara 7 wealthy for life. It was an impressive number, carefully calculated to seem generous while being a fraction of what the thermal cores were actually worth. "That's a lot of money," Helen admitted. "But no." The smile on Director Thel's face froze. "I'm sorry? No, we're not selling mining rights to our planet." Another executive, a human woman named Patricia Wu, who had clearly been hired to appeal to Helen's sense of species loyalty, leaned forward. "Governor, be reasonable. You've built something amazing here, but you lack the infrastructure for proper resource extraction. Galaxia can provide that. We can make this planet truly productive." "It's already productive," Rita interjected from her position by the wall. "Tourism alone generates more annual revenue than your offer." Director Thel's expression hardened. "Perhaps you don't understand the situation. Galaxia Development has significant influence with the Galactic Council. If you refuse our generous offer, we can make things difficult for human colonies throughout the galaxy. Trade restrictions, increased tariffs, delayed permits." Helen stood slowly. "Let me make sure I understand. You're threatening us?" "We're explaining reality," Patricia said quickly. "This is business. Galaxia always gets what it wants eventually. We're offering you a chance to profit rather than fight." "Get out," Helen said quietly. "Excuse me?" "Get out of my office. Get off my planet. You have 2 hours before I have you forcibly removed." Director Thel rose, his pleasant mask completely gone. "You're making a terrible mistake. We'll be back with legal authority and council support. You'll regret this." Rita escorted them out personally, her hand resting on the weapon at her belt and a not-so-subtle reminder that humans could defend what was theirs once they were gone. Helen activated the emergency council channel, calling in her senior staff. Khalid arrived within minutes, followed by Amy and the other department heads. "We have a problem," Helen announced. "Galaxia Development wants our planet, and they're willing to use the council to get it. Can they do that legally?" Amy asked. Khalid pulled up colonial law on his tablet. "It's complicated. Ashara 7 was given to us as an exile sentence, not a proper colony grant. The legal status is unclear. Galaxia will argue that since we were dumped here, we don't have true ownership rights. Rita slammed her fist on the table. We built this world from nothing. We turned a death sentence into a home. That makes it ours. I agree, Helen said. But we need to prove it legally. Get me every record from the original exile order. Get me documentation of everything we've built. Get me testimonials from the first survivors. We're taking this to Galactic Court. The next 3 months were a blur of legal preparation. Human lawyers, some of the best in the galaxy, volunteered their services. Documentary evidence piled up. The original survivors, now respected elders of the colony, prepared their testimonies. Galaxia Development responded by filing dozens of legal challenges. They claimed the thermal cores were too valuable to be left in human hands. They argued that humanity's rapid expansion proved they couldn't be trusted with such resources. They brought council members to testify about the original exile's intent. Public opinion across the galaxy split sharply. Some species supported humanity's claim, inspired by the transformation story. Others feared that if humans could claim Ashara 7 through survival alone, it would set a precedent for other harsh world colonies. The trial began on a cold morning at the Galactic High Court. Helen sat at the defendant's table, surrounded by lawyers and advisors. Across from her, Galaxia's legal team looked confident and well-funded. The prosecution opened with their main argument. Your Honors, Ashara 7 was never formally granted to humanity. It was selected as an exile destination. The humans there are technically still prisoners, not colonists. They have no more right to claim ownership than a prisoner has to claim a jail cell. Helen's lead lawyer, an older human named Benjamin Hayes, stood for the defense. Your Honors, my clients were sent to a lifeless rock and told to die there. Instead, they created a thriving world. Under galactic precedent, significant transformation of wasteland grants colonial rights to the transformers. The judges, 3 respected jurists from neutral species, listened carefully. Over the following weeks, both sides presented their cases. Galaxia showed geological surveys proving the planet's value. Humanity showed the before and after transformation, the lives built, the civilization created from nothing. The most powerful moment came when Helen herself testified. She stood before the court and spoke simply about those first days, about the heat that killed their machines, about the choice to go underground or die, about the years of work that followed. We didn't ask to be sent there, she said. We begged to remain on friendly worlds. But when exile was forced upon us, we accepted it. We took your death sentence and turned it into life. If that doesn't make Ashara 7 ours, then nothing in this galaxy truly belongs to anyone. The verdict came down 3 months after the trial ended. Helen stood in her office, surrounded by her senior staff. Watching the live broadcast from the Galactic High Court, the lead judge, a dignified Morphean with silver skin, read the decision in a steady voice. After careful consideration of all evidence and testimony, this court finds that the transformation of Ashara 7 from uninhabitable wasteland to thriving colony represents an extraordinary achievement. The humans were not given this world as a gift but as a punishment. Through their own labor and sacrifice, they created value where none existed. Helen held her breath. Therefore, we rule in favor of the human colonists. Ashara 7 is hereby recognized as a sovereign human territory with full colonial rights and protections. The claim by Galaxia Development Corporation is denied. Furthermore, we establish precedent that any species or group that successfully transforms a wasteland world through their own efforts gains legitimate ownership of that world, regardless of the original reason for their presence. The room erupted in cheers. Rita grabbed Helen in a fierce hug. Khalid wiped tears from his eyes. Amy was already on her communication device, spreading the news throughout the colony. Helen allowed herself a moment of pure relief before raising her hands for quiet. This is a great victory, but our work isn't done. Now we prove we can govern ourselves as well as we survived. 20 years later, Helen stood on a balcony overlooking what had once been the most hostile desert on Ashara 7. Below her, the city of Oasis spread across the surface, its buildings gleaming in sunlight filtered through a now breathable atmosphere. Trees lined the streets. Parks dotted the neighborhoods. Children played in fountains while their parents watched from comfortable benches. The transformation was complete. The atmospheric processors had done their work. The surface temperature averaged 85 degrees now, pleasant and warm. Rain fell occasionally from real clouds. The oceans were small but growing. Fed by comets and underground aquifers finally released to the surface, Ashara 7 had gone from deathworld to paradise in just 2 decades. Khalid joined her on the balcony. His hair now gray, but his eyes still sharp. The final environmental report came in. The planet is stable. We could shut down half the processors and maintain current conditions indefinitely. Don't shut them down yet, Helen said. Let's keep improving. I want my grandchildren to see forests here. You'll get your wish. Khalid gestured at the green spaces already visible. In another 10 years, we'll have old-growth forests. Real ecosystems with native and Earth species living together. Rita appeared in the doorway, leaning on a cane now but still commanding. The council sent another delegation. They want to hold their annual summit here next year. Something about the symbolism of meeting on a world that represents transformation. Helen laughed. The irony is perfect. Fine, we'll host them. Charge them triple the normal rates. Already did, Rita said with a grin. The tourism industry had exploded beyond their wildest projections. Ashara 7 was now the most visited world in the sector. The story of humanity's survival and triumph drew millions of visitors annually. The underground cities had been preserved as historical sites while new surface cities bloomed around them. The hot springs remained the most popular attraction. Medical tourists from dozens of species came seeking the healing waters. Voshtar had retired to a villa near the springs, his health restored. Spending his days writing a book about the mistakes his generation had made and the lessons humanity taught the galaxy. Helen visited him that evening. They sat on his porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been impossible when the atmosphere was toxic. I finished the final chapter, Voshtar said, showing her his manuscript. I call it When We Tried to Kill Them with Kindness. Dark humor, Helen observed. But accurate. We genuinely thought we were being merciful by exiling you instead of attempting genocide. We told ourselves you'd die quickly on Ashara 7 and spare everyone the unpleasantness of direct killing. And instead we thrived. You did more than thrive. You taught us something crucial. Voshtar set down his manuscript. Every species in the galaxy has some strength. The Thorians are strong, the Zenthari are clever, the Morphians are wise. But humans have something unique. What's that? Stubborn hope. The refusal to accept that anything is truly impossible. Most species would have given up and died here. You looked at Hel and said, we can work with this. Helen considered his words. Maybe it's because Earth was never easy. We evolved climbing out of disasters. Ice ages, droughts, predators. We learned that survival meant adapting or dying. Other species had difficult homeworlds too, Voshtar argued. But they didn't develop your particular brand of optimistic stubbornness. A young couple walked past on the street below, pushing a stroller. The child inside was human, but the couple was mixed, a human woman and a Zenthari man. Such pairings had become common on Ashara 7, the shared experience of transformation creating bonds across species. What will you do now? Voshtar asked. You've been governor for 20 years. You've won every battle worth fighting. You could retire, enjoy what you've built. Helen shook her head. Too much work left. We're planning to help other harsh world colonies. Share our terraforming techniques, our survival strategies. There are dozens of worlds out there that could be transformed like Ashara 7. Still saving people. Always saving people. That's what humans do. As the sun set completely, the city lights came on below. Millions of bulbs powered by the planet's own heat, illuminating streets where nothing should have survived. Music drifted up from an outdoor concert in Central Park. Laughter echoed from restaurants and cafes. Helen thought about those first desperate days. About the observation ships waiting for them to die. About the drilling rigs that failed and the systems that broke and the people who had cried in fear and frustration. She thought about the moment she first stood on the surface and felt the killing heat on her suit, knowing they had 3 hours before their equipment would fail. And she thought about now, about this thriving world of 5 million souls, about visitors from across the galaxy coming to see the impossible made real. They gave us hell, she said softly. Khalid appeared behind them with drinks, Rita following with appetizers. The old friends settled in for the evening, comfortable in the home they had built from nothing. And we turned it into the best damn resort in the galaxy, Rita finished. Raising her glass, they drank together as stars appeared above. Those same stars that had watched them arrive expecting to die, but instead witnessed them love.